Success in Eric Klopper's Hadachak versus the State of Oregon is only the beginning of circumcision lawfare. To be clear, I've wondered for more than a decade, closer to 15 or 16 years, why nobody had invoked the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution to sue over the current legal status of infant circumcision. From what I understand, there actually were some lawsuits in the late 90s, early 2000s that attempted to do this, but they were thrown out very quickly and didn't amount to much. I don't know entirely. I don't know that much about it. I seem to remember listening to some videos of maybe Steven Svoboda, might have been Zenas Bear. Anyway, I believe that may have happened. The Klopper lawsuit is really the first attempt in the modern era to do this. And I think it's important. I think it's a good thing. I don't quite know what to make of it, though. And the issue is this. Well, I guess the issue is manifold. The first issue is that the courts don't tend to lead the culture on hardly anything. You know, with segregation in the South and Brown versus the Board of Education, you realize all of society basically had really gotten on board with the egalitarianism. And I even have heard stories of like school teachers in the South in the middle of class berating segregation. This is in public schools in the South in the middle of the fight over segregation. So the social battle had already been lost for segregation at that point when separate but equal was thrown out by the courts. That's the first thing. I don't know. I actually think it might get past that point and might be judged on the merits. And so the lawsuit will succeed and the FGM law in the state of Oregon. Well, actually, this is a whole point in and of itself because the judge could throw it out immediately. More likely, he could issue an order that basically tells the state legislature you have 6 months to come up with a replacement law that resolves this, or the order goes into effect and the law lapses, or the law is then thrown out. I think Judge Friedman did this with the federal FGM law, and Congress refused to act. They didn't do anything, so now we have no federal anti-FGM law. But suppose this happens in the state of Oregon. So the law gets thrown out and it gets passed back to the legislature. Now, I submitted a question to Eric Klopper during his recent live stream with Lake Paraguay, the lawyer who achieved gay marriage equality in one particular state, I think in Oregon. And it was basically about this, supposing that the lawsuit succeeds, it gets thrown back to the states. What if the state legislature decides to simply not have an anti-FGM law? They could equalize it, but what if now the state of Oregon, the legislature of the state of Oregon, now the question got kind of garbled in translation. Eric Klopper doesn't tend to read questions verbatim, and it got badly garbled, and I don't think Paraguay even understood what I was trying to convey. And I don't think Eric quite sees the possibility that I'm seeing. And the state of the legislature of the state of Oregon could pass a new version of the law that equally protects boys and girls from infant genital mutilation. But what if the state of Oregon decides they would rather not have an anti-FGM law? This is already the status quo in multiple other states. I actually believe there's 9 states that have not explicitly banned female genital mutilation yet. Connecticut is currently in the process of passing a female genital mutilation law, which would bring that number to 8. And you can see right here, this was one of the headlines on the Connecticut Post. You know, these vapid women cheering, these are the exact same women that are committing mass genital mutilation of infant boys and will turn around and gaslight you about it if you dare utter one negative word about it. Keep in mind that the, quote, original, unquote, FGM case in the United States, that of Khalid Adem in the early 2000s that was decided in 2006. He cut off his daughter's clitoris with a pair of scissors. He was an immigrant from Ethiopia who cut off his daughter's clitoris with a pair of scissors. And he was ultimately found guilty under generic aggravated battery and child abuse statutes. I believe it happened in Georgia, and Georgia did not have an anti-FGM law at the time. They might be one of the states that still doesn't, actually. So I communicated this to Eric just in the chat. Paraguay, I don't think even understood what I was trying to say. I think Eric might have, but he didn't consider this a very serious possibility. He was very sanguine on the idea that, well, the legislature would then look at the issue in good faith and equalize the laws and ban MGM. I am very skeptical of this. Do you not think that the religious Jewish Israel lobby would not prefer to have no FGM law rather than ban circumcision? I think you're very much underestimating the degree to which, when this actually gets gets real, which is to say when this gets thrown out, when this law gets thrown out, these people are going to start screaming. They're going to contact every single legislator. And we know what they do. They put the screws to them and they get them to heel. We see this everywhere. I mean, Carter Steinhoff and John Sandbrook were doing a blitz of local city governments trying to just raise the awareness level. I mean, everybody's aware that city governments don't really control medical practices. The state does that. But they were doing this, and they would make initial contact and the representatives would be receptive. And then you'd wait a while and they'd completely shut down. They wouldn't talk to them at all. No further interest. Even in Europe, there was this female, I think, comedian who did a special on circumcision. It was in one of the Nordic countries. It might have been Denmark, but she was maybe during their ban attempt. And she was in the parliament halls, the hallways surrounding the parliament building. And she would walk up to politicians and she would just ask the question about circumcision. She would just say the word omskelling, which is circumcision it's not in German. It's in one of the other Nordic languages. And the politicians would literally turn around and run from her. I mean, it was insane. So this is what we're dealing with here. In my opinion, I think more focus needs to be put on the possibility that the forefront in anti-circumcision lawsuits is not going to be suing the states that have FGM laws. It's going to be suing the states that don't have FGM laws and are unequally enforcing the generic aggravated battery and child abuse laws. I mean, surely this must be ripe for lawsuits, although it's probably harder to prove a negative. I mean, you've got a law against assault and battery that has been used against FGM and isn't being used against MGM. Has never been used against MGM. I think, if Georgia is a state that still doesn't have an FGM law, but it did unequally enforce the aggravated battery and child abuse laws and still has widespread infant circumcision, I think that state should probably be the new frontier in circumcision lawsuits, because this is ultimately what it's going to come down to anyway. These lawsuits against states that do have FGM laws might end up being something of a distraction and a resource sink, because they're going to end where these other states that don't have FGM laws already are. I think maybe the best case scenario would be a place like, I think, Georgia. I'm pretty sure that's where the Khaled Adem case was. So they've enforced those laws against FGM. They don't enforce them against MGM. They don't have an FGM law, and I don't know if they have an equal protection clause to their constitution. I don't quite understand if that's relevant or how important that is. I mean, I thought the federal constitution overrode everything, that even state laws had to abide by it. But I don't know. Is this worth looking into? I think we need to be spending a lot more time thinking about this. Tell me what you guys think. Tell me in the comments. I'll talk to you guys later. Wishing Eric Klopper and How to Check good luck in their lawsuit. And I'll talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.